Heyo, Weibo here, and this is a really bad video. It hurts to watch, turn it off, turn it off. It's about time I make a better review of this game that won't be embarrassing to me. Starting with the opening. First of all, the music in the background is a bop. Then we've got the beginning part of the opening where we're introduced to the main cast, which is most likely there for new players jumping into the game before playing Persona 5, since even though it is technically a sequel to Persona 5, it doesn't really spoil or go too deep into events that happened in the original game. Hell, even Atlus themselves agree with this statement. Strikers can be enjoyed by anyone, no matter their level of Persona 5 knowledge. Anyway, here's where we get into the juicy meat of the opening, where we're met with a shot of the Phantom Thieves sitting on the subway, tossing around a phone with one of the new characters, Sophia, in it. Before we move on, I'd like to point out how this opening just oozes Persona 5 style, and I love that they were able to keep it in a spin-off game. Anyway, being the dumb cat he is, Morgana drops the phone and oh lord, that transition is smooth as fuck. This leads to a shot of a bunch of people complicitly trapped in a cage, and I said complicitly since if we pause, we see absolutely no struggle in them whatsoever. This complicity, or willful ignorance, is exactly what the main game was about, and it's good to see it represented here. We then pull away to see a vast city among two other identical cages, and turn to the right to see Sophia hopping across different buildings, being followed by a van, which is the one of the Phantom Thieves use, which could possibly be a metaphor for how throughout the entire game the Phantom Thieves and Sophia are following one another toward the major conflict of the game. We'll get to that one later. After that, the camera shifts toward a front view of the van to reveal another car after the Phantom Thieves, being the car of another new character, Zenkichi, which could be interpreted the same way as the Phantom Thieves and Sophia, where instead Zenkichi is chasing after the Phantom Thieves. Well, after this, we get a pretty bumpin' part of the track, as well as a nice fight scene showing off the Phantom Thieves and their new two allies. Alrighty then, now that we've covered the visual aspects of the opening, it's time to dive a little deeper into the track that accompanies it, more specifically, its lyrics. The first stanza goes into detail of the injustices performed before exploding into the message, "Don't let 'em do it like that," which heavily reinforces the themes of standing up to injustice that comes from the original game. The rest of the lyrics are a flip-flop between the singer encouraging you to stand up against the atrocities and the atrocities of what, you're standing up against being committed. Welp, we're finally done with what'll probably be my longest analysis of an intro I'll ever do, so let's move on to the gameplay. Alright, time for my opinions on the gameplay, which is that I actually got a great amount of enjoyment from it. For a completely different type of game than Persona 5, it being a Musou game, I really wasn't going in with very high expectations. However, when I started playing it, I ended up thoroughly enjoying it to the end, and hell, sometimes I'll just hop on the game whenever I'm bored and, maybe just put on podcasts on the background as audio. I also absolutely love that the developers found great ways to implement all of the mechanics from Persona 5 into Strikers, which was great to see, and it was implemented in a way that fits the new genre very well. Well, I think that's all my thoughts on the gameplay. Oh, it's you. We don't talk about merciless mode in this household. With that completely wiped from my memory, let's move on to the soundtrack. Persona 5 Strikers was cool and all, but I'ma just sit here and listen to the soundtrack for hours instead. I think very highly of the soundtrack, with all the music, at the very least, being bops, thanks to Lynn's amazing vocals mixed with the beautiful arrangement of instruments that best fit the lyrics properly. I just adore all of these, especially the remixes of Last Surprise and Rivers in the Desert, because oh my god, they're so fucking good. I'm almost at the point of believing that Atlas just doesn't miss when it comes to game OSTs. Anyway, with my gushing over the soundtrack aside, we should probably dig a little into the actual game, starting with the first oh wait, they're called jails in this game. Alice's Jail. There's a lot, and absolutely nothing to say at the same time. I guess a good way to start is to point out that as opposed to the original game, Strikers has a bunch of antagonists who you're supposed to sympathize with, and jails being a prison of sorts for the ruler instead of a land of their own desires that a palace is to its ruler. So, Alice's whole shtick is that she was bullied as a kid and now wants to take innocent's desires? Yeah, this game didn't really start off on a strong note. As, in my honest opinion, Alice is by far the most forgettable villain in the entire game. Which is quite a shame, since the first boss of Persona 5 is one of, if not, the most memorable and debatably the best villain of the entire game. Alice's Jail was quite fun to play through, however, as the gimmicks we see in later jails are first introduced here, and thus I haven't grown tired of them yet. Other than that, I'd really say that Alice's Jail is painfully mediocre, which really sucks because had they put an interesting twist on the bullied as a kid trope, it might have actually been interesting. Next, we got Natsume, who's actually quite interesting thanks to his relation with Yusuke. Natsume is a famous author who stole the desires of many to force a good reception of his book, which he shamelessly stole parts of other successful stories and stitched them together to make. This prompts the Phantom Thieves to stop him, and on the way, they find out his reason for doing all of this was an immature outburst after overhearing his editors talking about rigging an award in his favor, since his work really wasn't that great, as well as talking about how he needs to live up to the expectations of his father, who is a famous author. Anyway, once they change his heart, Natsume publicly announces his resignation as an author in order for him to atone for what he's done. However, this is where Yusuke approaches him and demands that he doesn't quit. Yusuke tells him that he can't run away like that and instead work to improve his own work and earn back his reputation legitimately. I really like the whole idea of redemption behind this one, as well as the villain being more than a two-dimensional character like the first. Then we have Mariko's Jail, which, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't like at all. The gameplay at this point was getting really repetitive, and I found the gimmick of finding generators quite annoying. However, the villain herself more than made up for the less than desirable jail. She's a mayor of the town and is overworking her subordinates to the point of collapsing of exhaustion, which is pretty fucking awful, so what could possibly attempt at redeeming this character? Well, we find a memory of hers that's shown an accident caused by poor infrastructure design that ends up killing a child. So, in a guilt-ridden state, she tries her best to prevent something like that ever happening again, so that's her reason for overworking her subordinates. Once the Phantom Thieves give her a change of heart, like Natsume, she tries to resign, but the mother of the dead child tells her that the city needs her and gives her the resolve to enact some true changes. After that, we got Okinawa Jail, which is actually a jail with no ruler to be found. This is quite the twist that nicely breaks up the formulaic monotony that was the process of going through jails at this point in the game. In this jail, we find out that the true intentions behind the app Emma, which is what they've been using to access all the jails, was actually designed with change of hearts in mind, and this rundown research facility was looking into it before being handed over to Konoe and his company Madis. Other than what I've stated, nothing really happens except Ryuji finally says the fuck word, let's go! Celebration aside, the next jail is Akane's, who was actually forcefully made a jail ruler by Konoe to divert attention from him for a while to prevent his own downfall at the hands of the Phantom Thieves. Akane is Zenkichi's daughter, and a massive fan of the Phantom Thieves, whilst unknowingly having a father who's been working with them the entire time. When they all hear about it, they decide they have to go into this jail. Once they arrive, they're promptly trapped, all except for Futaba, and she runs off to get some help before returning. She then returns with Zenkichi, in which neither of them can fight shadows, so instead of the usual beat-em-up gameplay we're used to at this point, we get a segment where we play as Zenkichi and sneak around until we get to the cage the party's trapped in. Once we arrive, the party is freed and Zenkichi awakens to his persona after seeing his daughter's shadow describe how he's basically abandoned her in pursuit of the man who killed his wife in a hit-and-run years ago. This is quite amazing character building. Yeah, even if the idea isn't totally original, it's still pretty nice. Akane's Jail is quite different from most, as this one is mainly a maze that you go through until you reach the end, where instead of fighting Akane, we're met with her perceptions of the Phantom Thieves and we fight them one-on-one. This was quite an intense fight and I really enjoyed it. However, there was a major missed opportunity where we could have played as all the members fighting their own shadows instead of only Joker. Regardless, it was still one of the most fun fights of the game. After that, they tell her to give it up and set sights on Konoe, the source of it all. We've finally gotten to one of my favorite palaces, if not my favorite, which is Konoe's palace. The entire design is based off of his warped worldview and his genuine view of himself as a hero that defends humanity's interests, where in reality he's creating a world where he controls everyone in the name of complete security. We witness his extremely traumatic reason for his ideals stemming from his abusive father threatening to kill a young Konoe, where it's implied that he also killed his mother, and Konoe ends up killing his own father to protect himself. This is why he desires for a world of complete security, so that nothing like what happened to him ever happens to anyone else. And in order to achieve this, he's stolen the masses' desires, essentially controlling them. The boss fight only reinforces his genuine belief that he is a hero, with many dialogue lines of him shouting that he'll take the Phantom Thieves down and calling them villains. Once they defeat him, he has a change of heart and confesses to everything. So that's the end of the game, right? Since everything's been wrapped up nicely? Unfortunately, no. That leads us to our final two jails, the Jail of Abyss and the Tree of Knowledge. First of all, in the Jail of Abyss, we find out that Ichinose, previously a minor character that would check up on the Phantom Thieves, is revealed to be the creator of both Sophia and Emma, with her ultimate goal being control over the populace. Sophia was the first prototype, which she ultimately scrapped, only to be found by the Phantom Thieves later. After some really tropey events take place, Sophia awakens to her true persona and they defeat Ichinose. After some more events transpire, they make their way to the Tree of Knowledge, which is the final jail of the game, and also surprisingly linear. I would say this jail is super boring, but I don't really think you're supposed to be spending that much time in here anyways. At the end, we're met with the final boss of the game, Emma, or now known as the false god Demiurge. I'm gonna be entirely honest when I say that this boss sucks as a concept. I actually enjoyed the gameplay of the fight a lot, and how it makes you use your entire party, which I found really neat. However, it still does feel like the whole thing with Emma was used to pad out gameplay time, as it's completely unoriginal, as well as the fact that the game could have easily ended at Konoe's jail, since he represented the ideal of complete law just fine, without being a god. Anyway, that was a lot more than I was expecting to talk about for a spin-off game. But hey, that's how it be sometimes. My overall thoughts are that this is a pretty good game and is worth the price. However, if possible, I'd definitely wait for a sale in order to get it, especially since the Persona 25th anniversary is later this year. In terms of spin-offs, I believe Persona 5 Strikers is the best of all of them. However, if we want to compare them to the official games, however, it doesn't stand a chance, as I believe all the main games are way better, which, to be fair, is expected. But anyways, this has been Weibo. May your day be full of degeneracy, and peace.